And I think the point is, yes, we do see that we don't want to be blindsided when we have, when we try and put in place a common continental central bank, and then realize that there are significant other issues that we should have dealt with a little before. So I just wanted to record to associate myself with those remarks because I think it's something we need to deal with now. However, as Chair, you mentioned there may be requests, this may lead to significant costs and things like that, and that is well noted. But maybe as a middle ground, we may want, I would suggest maybe having the technical team to first just summarize what has been put together before us as the governors yesterday and other places. We also just now heard about the experience in other parts of Africa, and indeed even other parts, Southern Africa, Eastern Africa. We are at different points, and so there's a lot of experience around this table, but I think what we are lacking to begin with is just a collection of that evidence into one document that we can read and review. So I don't think the issue should be getting consultants to write it for us. I really think we have the capacity to summarize, bring together all this wisdom, and maybe at the next meeting we can discuss it, or at least be in a position to benefit from it, and then decide which way to go. I submit, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. I also wanted to echo the sentiments that have been put forward by the Governor of the Reserve Bank of South Africa, and to remind the meeting that this is an issue that we have been discussing for a very long time. And perhaps it's worthy to go back to the decisions that we made and remind ourselves. One of the things that we agreed on in the past is that this is a long-term project that we cannot achieve in a very short time. First of all, a monetary union has to be preceded by integration in other areas first. It is actually the last step. You can't do it before you achieve other forms of integration. As a result of that, I remember very well in the meeting in Algiers, can't remember the year, that we agreed and a decision was made that we proceed with integration by regions. We already have regional groupings that are working and in which we are making strides and developments, that we should continue for the time being to work on integration within our respective regions, do as much as possible as regions while integration is happening in other areas, so that at the time that we are ready now for a monetary union, we should have developed our systems within the regions. Experts were engaged. We spent money on this project. The very same issues that are being raised today and that the Governor of South Africa is reminding us of were raised by these experts. We reviewed these recommendations that it is best for us to wait and look at how we can do other things first and then see how we can proceed from there. There were issues, many issues that were discussed, including variable geometry, that some that are ready can perhaps go in before the others, but not all of us going in, depending on the readiness to do so. And I think in that light, perhaps the way to proceed with this issue going forward is to spend time reviewing and updating each other on how these regional blocks are doing and what we are doing as regions, how much we have developed over time, so that we catch up with each other and we continue with that regional work in preparation for the very long term, which is very long, far, far away, I must stress. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I comment, and then we'll come to the governor of Malawi? I think what we need, my personal view, is a strategy. Because, and when you want a strategy, you need experts to work on this strategy. And experts of different types, legal, economic, finance, banking, and trade, etc. So we need a strategy. But the Secretariat is trying to respond to the request of the AECB meeting. But we have to have a strategy and then comply with this strategy and start to see what are the resources and the tools we need and put it in place to implement the strategy gradually over a timeline. But we cannot come in every meeting and suggest something new. What about trying to find out about this or trying to find out about that? What about this model? What about a banking union? It will not work this way. We have to have a strategy that the experts will work on it and present it to this meeting and be approved, and then we work on the implementation of the strategy. But the Secretariat or the executing team, and we'll have to have a real strong organization to execute, we cannot be changing direction every little time. I think this is my point of view, and I think I insist that we need, yes, experts and consultants, and this is going to be a very complex and expensive project. Governor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If governors agree, I would propose we give this to the Secretariat and the Bureau, go back and take stock of the decisions taken as Governor Lesotho has just said, and present a paper to the next meeting with detailed, showing exactly what has been discussed, what has been decided, and then from there propose the way forward. As rightly the Governor from Lesotho said, this is a long-term project. But we need to take stock, track of what is happening, so to avoid coming back to assume like we are starting afresh. And I think the Secretariat will have to play a big role here, because we governors keep on changing, and so we are happy that we have a governor from Lesotho that is, has been here. The fact that we had agreed to focus on achieving regional integration. Like today we are talking of setting up a monetary institute. We've been working on that for the East African community. Thank you.
Okay. Governor, please.
Thank you so much, Honorable Chair. Just to take you to the actual annex, Annex 4, probably my first point would be that on page 2 and 3, when I was reading this annex report, I wasn't so sure why the Secretariat had pulled out these decisions that are on Annex 2 and 3, and how they related specifically to the issue which Annex 4 is dealing with. I wasn't so sure. I wonder whether the Secretary can comment on that. But coming through the report, Honorable Chair, it would seem to me that there are parallel mechanisms underway, because the issue which is explained on page 1 of the introduction is covering the work of the STC on finance, monetary affairs, and economic planning. So the STC on page 1 is going ahead with 3 separate actions. The first one is to try to understand why countries are not ratifying, are not signing up to all legal instruments that are establishing financial institutions for the continent. That's where the issue is. We are not yet signing and ratifying. There are issues, and those have to be understood. We are not ratifying and signing for the establishment of the African Central Bank. Have we established why that's the case? Why Malawi has not done it? Have they come to us and asked us? And I think that's because there are issues, and that's, I think, the point which they are trying to, based on what the work of the STC, they want to consult us and establish why we're not doing it. And that's the first piece of work. The second piece of work, timelines were initially thought, have been missed, and we don't know where we are going. And also to establish, can this work? By when and how? And I think that's the second point which they want to work on. And then finally, the third point which they have raised, and the fourth point. But, Honorable Chair, what I wanted to comment on was that either the framework, whether it has to go through the STC and the AUC itself, or through the SACB, as the Vice Chair is proposing, we need to come out clear as to who is going to do what and how can that be done, so that all these issues can be, we can have a reflection on whatever was decided in the past as to how it fits in now modern world today and how we see the future moving forward. Because there are so many issues, one cannot just jump to this issue now as it is without a better understanding of all these other issues and how they fall into place, including the mechanism itself, whether we use the SB or we continue to use the STC as is being suggested in this report. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Yeah, we have been working with the AUC, the African Union Commission, on the establishment of the African Central Bank for some years now, and we have a joint team that is working on the project. And when we had to revise also the convergence criteria at the AACB level, those convergence criteria were adopted by the governors, but we know that in the convergence criteria, we have some of them that are related to the fiscal side. And that's the reason why governors ask that we work with AUC to present the reports also to the STC. We had a meeting in Yaoundé where the two reports were presented. And ministers asked AUC and AACB to continue to work together, but with the regional economic communities, since many of the decisions that should be taken have to be implemented at the regional community, economic communities level. So we had also ministers requesting that AUC, AACB work by meeting the regional economic communities. That's what we did also in Niamey in last July. And we're still continuing to work with them to come up with a consensus on those criteria and how to implement the criteria. So I know we still have to continue the dialogue with the regional economic communities and the AUC. And I guess Honorable Professor Victor Harrison is also working with us on that subject. And we're trying to move so that we all come with the same understanding of the criteria and the way to implement them. Maybe he would like certainly to take the floor to add to what I said. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. C'est vrai tout ce qui a été dit, que c'est un processus de longue haleine. Mais nous avons, comme je disais tantôt, commencé notre travail. Je confirme ce qui a été dit par le secrétaire exécutif donc, de l'association que, effectivement, on en a discuté au niveau du CTS et il faudra utiliser le CTS au fur et à mesure. Et donc, on en a commencé, et j'ai confirmé hier ou avant-hier que les critères de convergence sont des outils pertinents pour qu'on puisse avancer ensemble. Et je dis qu'on va travailler sur le côté fiscal hier avec des organisations telles le FMI et l'OCDE. On planifie donc des choses pour l'année prochaine. En ce qui concerne donc cette collaboration, la collaboration est de plus en plus étroite avec le secrétariat exécutif et la Commission de l'Union africaine. On en a organisé, il y a un mois à Addis Abeba, une réunion pour savoir pourquoi les États ont hésité à signer et à ratifier. Il y en a plusieurs raisons, mais je peux vous dire que, et là donc lors de cette réunion d'experts, il y a un problème de bureaucratie. Il y a un manque de le pourquoi de l'Union africaine. Nous surveillons de près l'initiative prise au niveau de rôle des banques centrales, je l'ai déjà souligné, est très important. Merci.
Thank you. Can I say a comment? I think also the feeling I get is that the work that's being done is not clearly reported here. So for instance, I was telling the Secretary, why don't we have the minutes of the STC meetings here so that we can see and understand and know the progress that have been done in terms of the work that has been done. So I think there is a lack of communication in terms of the work that has been done and what's being presented here. And I would urge the Secretary to work on these comments and work on the format in the future to make sure it is very clear to the members. Thank you. I think we can proceed to the next point. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairperson. The next agenda item is on the progress report. Tables 1 and 2 below reflect the 2018 performance of the sub-regions with respect to the revised AMCP targets. Overall, 22 countries out of 49 with a percentage of 44.9% met all the primary criteria in 2018 compared to 18 out of 52 countries with a percentage of 34.6% in 2017. Improved performance in terms of budget deficit and central bank financing of the budget deficit were recorded as depicted by compliance ratios of 82.4% and 81.6% respectively in 2018. Of note is that the inflation rate criterion recorded the lowest compliance ratio with a percentage of 68.6% in 2018. Table 2 shows that only one country out of 46 which reported with a percentage of 2.2% complied with the 4 secondary criteria in 2018 as in 2017 where 1 out of 52 met the 4 criteria with a percentage of 1.9%. Tax revenue collection is a major challenge with only 23.5% of member countries meeting the criterion greater than 20% of GDP for 2018. As for the deliberation recommendations of the Bureau recommended to the Assembly of Governors to note the results achieved in the implementation of the African Monetary Cooperation Program as indicated, and this was already said in tables 1 and 2. We move to 7.3. Furthermore, the Bureau had large discussions on the convergence criteria related to, inter alia, the volatility of performances, the need for structural reforms to build more resilient economies to shocks, the relevance to have criteria related to structural reforms and corruption, the need to have central bank independence to promote convergence, the issue of moving to a next stage when a number of countries achieve convergence and the need to have large economies converge for a set period before doing so. This is for your consideration, Chairperson.
Thank you. As we said, it's important that to get some advice on how to proceed where many countries are really within the convergence criteria, and what should we do about that, and how do we proceed with that. So the Secretary, I'm sure he's going to revise a lot in terms of the approach with what how the work is being presented, and etc. Shall we move to the following? Governor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I make reference to item 7.2.3, where the Bureau had observed and recommended the need for structural and then the need for criteria that takes into account structural reforms to build more resilient economies to shocks, the relevance to have criteria related to structural reforms and corruption, and the need to have central bank independence to promote convergence. I do not know at this point if the Bureau is recommending new convergence criteria because from the reports that we have, there had already been...
This is reporting of the discussions, just for the information of the members of the committee, of the meeting, the association, if they think that they would like to take this forward as an additional convergence criteria. But this is like a briefing note on the discussion, and this point was raised and discussed in the Bureau.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
It's reported without any specific recommendation.
I'm concerned because it says deliberations and recommendations of the Bureau. Because it says...
No, it's deliberations, not recommendations.
Okay, Chair.
I'm sorry, this word recommendations is wrong.
Thank you, Chair.
It was just deliberations.
Like you said, it was just information on what we did that.
Sorry?
It was just information on the...
It's information, it's just reporting, yeah. You can make an amendment there. Move on, please. Any other comments?
Thank you, Chairperson. The next agenda item is on the guidelines for the computation of the convergence criteria. A quick presentation of the issue is that during the Bureau meeting last March in Dakar, there was a proposal by the Central Bank of Egypt to propose guidelines for the computation of the convergence criteria so that all member central banks are on the same page. The report was presented to the Bureau, and a decision was taken to dispatch the guidelines to all member central banks for possible comments. The comments which were received by a number of member central banks were incorporated in the updated version, which is in Annex 6, and they related to the way some of the RECs and some of the member central banks calculate their convergence criteria. So, as for the presentation of the issue, allow me, Chair, to say that the comments which were received were mainly adopting the guidelines, were mainly welcoming the guidelines, and some of them showed some slight differences in the ways which member central banks thought the convergence criteria were being calculated. So, after the discussions we had in the Bureau recommended to the Assembly of Governors to adopt the revised version of the guidelines, the ACB Secretariat should send the revised version to all member central banks. This is for your consideration, Chairperson.
Thank you. The next point is the consultative meeting between AUC and ACB and the regional economic communities, right, on the reports of the ACB experts group on the refinement of the convergence criteria.
Yes, Chairperson, as you mentioned, this is the report on the consultative meeting which took place in Niger, Niamey, on the margin of the African Union Summit of Heads of States last July. The meeting went on for 3 days, and I just want to clarify that the number of the regional economic communities which attended the meeting was not large. It was a poor attendance from the RICS because there were some logistical difficulties with attending, and there were already other meetings on the margin of the summit, and only we had 4 or 5 RICS which attended. And at this meeting, the 2 reports which were adopted by our Assembly in 2017 and 2018 respectively in relation to the convergence criteria and the timelines for the establishment of the African Central Bank, together with the monitoring framework and the peer review mechanism. These 2 reports were presented at that meeting, and because of the poor attendance of the RICS, we did not have a consensus, or we did not have big discussions on the 2 reports, and this is why the meeting recommended that these reports to be sent to all the RICS through the AUC to have their comments, and also the meeting recommended that other consultative meeting with the RICS should be convened in order to have discussions and to have consensus on the convergence criteria and the timelines, and to try to align the AACB program to that of the RICS. Prior to the upcoming specialized technical committee meeting, which is to take place next March in Accra, Ghana, because at that meeting, the report of the consultative meeting will be presented by AACB, so that ministers of finance, economic development and integration, they will, and of course member central bank governors, will discuss the report and will discuss the recommendations of the consultative meeting. As for the deliberations on 9.2, the Bureau recommends to the Assembly of Governors to take note of the information provided in the report and request AUC to forward to AACB Secretariat the comments received from the RICS for the information of the Bureau in February 2020, prior to the meeting of the STC in March 2020 in Accra, Ghana, where Ministers of Finance, Economic Development, Integration, and Central Bank Governors meet to discuss the monetary and financial affairs of the EU member states.
Very complicated. Can you tell us in 2 words what you mean here?
What we mean is that already the African Union Commission sent the comments for the RICS, so we just need the comments when they are received by the EUC to be sent to AACB Secretariat, so that we can incorporate in our reports and present to governors in the next Bureau meeting in Dakar.
Like months ago, and you will present next meeting in Dakar like months. So is that like a meeting, we are going to report on the developments in a meeting a year later?
No, what will take place is that already the AUC sent the reports. The comments will be received by the AUC.
This meeting, it took place in
July.
In July?
Yes.
And the coming meeting in Dakar is when?
February.
This took place in July 2018?
In July 2019, last month.
And then it will take place in February?
No, the meeting with the RICS, we suppose that we meet with the RICS again.
So 8 months later, February is the meeting with the RICS.
February is the Bureau meeting.
The Bureau meeting. So
yes.
8 months later, the Bureau will be reported on what happened. One of the issues, I think, is that the slow motion we are in, really. A very slow motion, you know. A very slow motion. Until the information reaches this association, it's on a meeting that happened a year and a half ago. and then we go back to them with our comments, which will not accept. So, I mean, until a decision or a change takes place, I think the mechanism for getting things done is a killing. Is a killing. It cannot work like this. I think you need to change. The secretary has to recommend a different structure of how things are done and happening, and the structure of this report. Obviously, the governors don't want now anymore. You've been used to a report on just reporting what happened with the action plans and the decisions. No, they want a vision, and they want views, and they want assessment. Okay? So I think that the approach has to change completely. You have a lot of challenge, and I think you will have to discuss with the chairman what you require over the coming period to get support to be able to achieve these challenges. But it's a very slow process. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe he forgot to.
Mr. Harris?
Merci, Monsieur le Président. C'est vrai ce qu'il a dit, qu'il n'y avait que 4 ou 5 communautés économiques régionales, malgré le fait que nous avons payé les billets d'avion donc des représentants des communautés économiques régionales. Nous avons par la suite déjà envoyé pour demander les commentaires. Mais nous trouvons que ce n'est pas suffisant de les envoyer, mais à partir de ce mois d'août, des missions sont déjà programmées pour aller donc rencontrer et demander localement quels sont leurs avis. Et ce qui fait qu'à partir du moment, d'ici la fin de l'année, nous continuons à faire le maximum des visites possibles au niveau des communautés économiques régionales, mais aussitôt que nous avons les informations, nous allons les transmettre donc au secrétariat de l'association de Banque centrale. Et donc, pas attendre, donc là, c'est trop tard s'il faut attendre l'année prochaine, mais à partir de ce mois d'août, nous commençons déjà les visites.
Mr. Harrison, your ministers are not taking us seriously. Your ministers are not even attending the meetings or sending delegations for the meetings. So, the RICS is very important. The RICS is very important. How can we move forward? And I think we need to discuss here what should we do about that, because neither the secretary or the technical committees can and do we invite specific ministers from specific countries, or we can have backups so that in case some people apologize, we can invite other members? Is that possible? I mean, we have to have a model that can really operate and work. Please, Governor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Probably we need some information as to why the ministers are not attending these meetings. Are they been invited and not coming at all, meaning they are not interested? Any specific reasons as to why? Thank you.
I think the AU should answer to this. Mr. Harrison, you should put pressure on them. You should tell them the governors are not happy. And we should have a mechanism where we can have alternates.
Merci de me poser la question. Est-ce que j'ai les éléments? Est-ce que j'ai les éléments? Pourquoi ils ne viennent pas? Quand on organise une réunion en Égypte même, là, vraiment, le ministre vient. Et s'il ne vient pas, honorable gouverneur, oseriez-vous lui poser la question, pourquoi vous ne venez pas? C'est l'ambiguïté de ma position. J'aurais aimé qu'ils viennent tous. Mais s'ils ne viennent pas, ai-je les moyens de les faire pression? Honorable gouverneur, avez-vous les moyens de faire pression?
Shall we move forward?
Thank you, Chairperson. The next recommendation is on 9.2.2. The Bureau recommends to the Assembly of Governors to consider the organization of another consultative meeting between AACB, AUC, and the RICS prior to the STC meeting in Accra in order to have a consensus on the convergence criteria and the timelines on the establishment of the African Central Bank. For your consideration, Mr. Chairperson.
Okay, thank you. Actually, there is a new let's go to number 10 then. The Continental Seminar. Is it? Yes, Governor?
Sorry, there is a comment on 924, and it relates to the presentation to the Assembly of Heads of State and Government at a meeting that took place in Niger of a proposal on the payment system. I find this to be very curious because as the report indicates here, that proposal was presented to the heads of state without the involvement of the governors. Well, why this is not very good is that heads of states are not experts in the payment system. The payment system is in the domain of central banks. And if central banks are not taken along and an institution bypasses the central banks to go and make a direct presentation to the heads of states and seeks the approval of the heads of state on an item that the central banks have an exclusive jurisdiction to administer, then it portends very serious danger for the stability of the financial system. I do recall that the position was very clear that that presentation should not be made to the heads of state unless it is first made to the governors of central banks and they approve of that proposal. I do also recall at a meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, which Nexim and Afrexim made a presentation to the governors. It was a preliminary presentation, and they did say that they were working on the modalities which they were going to come back to the governors to share. And for them to not come back to the governors with the details and to go straight to the heads of state to seek approval is what I'm very concerned about that, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We were concerned about that too in the Bureau 2 days ago, and we are reporting it here, is that we believe that this is not protocol-wise and professional-wise, it's not appropriate. And we requested that we notify Afri-Exim Bank of our concerns about what happened. Actually, I got a request also in my country that the Afri-Exim Bank wants to meet my president. So, I mean, I don't know where they're going. So, do you think we should notify them in writing about our point of view here in the meeting? Yes, Governor Kanyako.
Yes, I think we should notify them. But we have got the African Union Commission here, and the African Union Commission participated in our meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh, and they allowed this presentation to take place in Niger. So I have a fundamental problem with it. The second is that we took particular decisions with respect to payment systems in Sharm el-Sheikh. We set out a process which we will deal with under item 12. And that process was set in, and I noticed from the report of those workshops that Afri-Exim Bank didn't participate in those workshops, and they were invited, I am aware of that, and then they ran to our heads of state. They've got to be put in their place. They've got to be told in no uncertain terms that payment system is the preserve of the central banks, that it is a key financial stability issue, and that they cannot run to the heads of state and do these things. I will actually write to my head of state to tell him to chase them away if they come to want to make a presentation to him.
We agree on that. Continental Seminar, that's next.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, with your permission, the Assembly of Governors' wise action is needed on the point 9.2.3. We did not go into it, in which, in addition, the Bureau recommended to the Assembly of Governors to consider the request by the AUC for technical and financial assistance from the ACB in relation to the establishment of the African Monetary Institute, taking into account the concerns raised by the Technical Committee on the financial assistance requested by the AUC, and the fact that there is no clear proposal for the amounts which the ACB member central banks may contribute, or a formula which shows explicitly the share to be paid by each central bank. This is for your consideration, Chairperson.
Yeah, we have discussed in the Bureau about the African Monetary Institute and deliberations that were there and the meeting that took place between the African Union and Nigeria Central Bank, correct, Mr. Harrison? And we had some queries regarding that and the model that's going to work and who will be the participants in such an initiative and who is going to determine that. And I think that this should be coordinated through the Bureau and the AECB. It should not be an independent initiative without the approval of the Bureau and AECB, and making sure that we have the participants required, and also the financial assistance. It has to be on the basis that we're going to study this subject matter, this project by the Secretariat, and provide recommendations. Correct? Mr. Papadiop?
Yes.
Yeah? Yeah. There's a lot of politics here. Oh my God. Speak out.
Okay.
He doesn't speak. I inherited him from you. He doesn't speak.
Okay. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Yeah, during the technical committee, there was a discussion regarding the establishment of the African Monetary Institute. We know that for this institute, in the timelines, we would like to have it established by 2020. So we are working with the AUC to have that implementation. So I guess the AUC came with a request indicating that what was allowed to the AUC in their budget. I guess they were mentioning the amount of $200,000, which was not sufficient to put in place the the African Monetary Institute. So they wanted to have a request to AACB, technical assistance, financial assistance, that would allow them to put in place the African Monetary Institute. We would like just to recall that the African Monetary Institute should be doing the work needed to put in place the African Central Bank. So since we have that common project, they were thinking, since they have some difficulties in terms of putting together the means needed to create the African Monetary Institute, central banks are requested to help. And I guess they also mentioned that the Central Bank of Nigeria was already assisting in finding the headquarters for the African Monetary Institute that needed maybe more resources in terms of hiring the consultants or personnel that should work at the African Monetary Institute. That is the reason why they requested assistance from the central banks. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Yes, Governor, please.
Thank you. It appears that we need to do a lot of work within a very short period. Like if we are going to have it in 2020, we need to have the statutes, which must be signed by the president. And also, we need to know what the budget would look like. These are all important. But the statute is very important. It has to be ready because it has to be signed by the heads of states. Maybe AUC will have a heads of states summit on it, and then, so that they can look at it also and then ratify. Yeah. But of course, we need also a budget that will tell us how it looks like, how much each central bank is going to contribute. So it appears we need to do some work very quickly, get the building blocks right before we move in.
I sympathize with you, my friend. Well, yeah. I think also we have to start implementing a method of like some of the decisions that are requested, that we can get approvals of the outcome by circulation on certain matters that we have agreed on, or reporting by circulation in terms of some studies to the governors. I mean, like not waiting for just from one year to the other for the meetings. Some things that can be circulated, at least to the Bureau. Nigeria, Governor.
Thank you very much. I think just a little bit of information or clarification. The Central Bank of Nigeria received an official communication from the AUC to the effect of providing accommodation for the would-be AMI. I think the comment is against the backdrop of the chairman's comment that the Bureau had considered the issues and felt that the process should be more inclusive. I'm saying this just the role the Central Bank of Nigeria has played so far. We received an official communication from the AUC on the purpose of provision of accommodation for the AMI. That's the communication. And what we've done so far is to identify a place. And we have not even officially communicated to the AUC, but at the sidelines of this meeting, we've unofficially informed them that we've located a place, the facility, and
we've commissioned some agency to do, to look at the requirements, renovations and stuff like that. So that's the extent of the commitment. So we haven't done anything more than that. So I think we needed to provide that clarification to put the record straight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. It's just because the AMI is important, we want to make sure that, of course, the involvement of the Bank of Nigeria will be of a tremendous help, but to make sure, because this important subject, we can put all the ingredients and the resources we can amongst the central banks, and also just the awareness of everybody, how this, why is this there, why is proceeding, and how it's going to proceed, that's all. As you see, we have tough governors here. Thank you. So we will go through one more agenda item and take a break. Is that fine? 10 minutes? Sama?
Thank you, Chairperson.
The Continental Seminar?
Yes. The next agenda item on the draft report of the ACB Continental Seminar for the year 2019. Actually, it was at the Sharm el-Sheikh meeting last year that the Assembly of Governors selected the theme, Renewed Protectionist Tendencies.
I want to ask a question. When the ACB requests and approves a seminar and a symposium, when they approve a seminar, is it with the objective of creating awareness and knowledge across our central banks in terms of a certain topic, or also the association is looking for some recommendations out of these seminars? So that, but I understand it has been a successful seminar that took place in Mauritius, and there were 24 central banks involved.
Yes, Chairperson. I think Mr. Diop will attend to this concern.
Yeah, thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Yeah, usually in terms of the purpose even for the AACB, a good part of it is to allow an exchange of experience, and also to have for the experts, officers of central banks, to be trained in some specific areas. So the Continental Seminar is a possibility for central bank officers or experts to meet, discuss on topics of interest for their work. And also, we could have, during the Continental Seminars, recommendations that could be implemented. I know yesterday you were talking about the need to have more targets for the recommendations. We used to have also some recommendations that led to some projects. For example, we were talking about the Continental Seminar that we had in Algiers in 2014, where one of the recommendations was to set up a continental body that would help or put in place a working group to help integrate payment systems in Africa. But when the recommendation was presented to the governors, it was indicated that the recommendation could not be implemented at that time, as many sub-regions did not have enough progress in the integration of their payment system at the sub-regional level. And that was postponed. And at one time, we did come back to that recommendation and are trying to implement it, because we had, during last June, 2 workshops that were related to the integration of payment systems. So sometimes we can have some continental seminars with recommendations that could lead to some projects that we have. And sometimes we have recommendations also that central banks have just to try to implement if there are things that could improve the way maybe we have certain projects or ideas that could be foreseen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Activities of the CAPS. This should be quite important.
Yes, Chairperson.
Shall we take a 10-minute break or finish this one? Can have a, huh? Can have that one? Okay. Go forward with this one.
Okay, Chairperson.
But we want elaboration on this, because this is a very important committee.
Okay. The activities of the Community of African Banking Supervisors, the CAPS, and inside the report we have the activities of the community throughout a whole year, and mainly the annual conference and meeting of the CAPS, which took place in Cairo, Egypt last June. In this meeting, the two existing working groups, which is the Cross-Border Banking Supervision Working Group, headed by the South African Reserve Bank, and also the Working Group on Crisis Management and Banking Resolution, which is headed by the Central Bank of Nigeria. They presented their activities for the year, and also there were some presentations in the first day by some international and regional institutions. As for the report itself, there are some recommendations which we present to the Assembly of Governors to consider in relation to the work program of the CAPS and also the activities which are to be implemented for the next year. On paragraph 11.2.1, the Bureau recommends to the Assembly of Governors to take note of the activities of the Community of African Banking Supervisors, including the activities of the working groups.
Hold on, please. Yeah. I would recommend that the head of the CAPS come himself or herself and present the work of this committee all together to the meeting, okay, and explain the scope, because also we have new governors present with us, so explain the scope of work and scope of responsibility of the CAPS and the work progress so far, and what were the decisions by the AECB, and what is the status of implementation of each decision, you know. But reporting in few lines about the deliberations and recommendations, I think there are certain key matters like the convergence criteria, the CAPS committee, certain matters of strategic importance to the association that these head of committees should come and report themselves and explain what they're doing. Because as I said, there is also a lack of communication of of the work going on the ground and what's being reported here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. As you rightly said, there was a decision in Sharm el-Sheikh that in relation to the CAPS report, that the two heads of the CAPS working group come to our meeting, and the Secretariat used to do the reporting, but we requested this in the Bureau meeting last year and also in Sharm el-Sheikh, that the CAPS reports to be presented to the Assembly of Governors by the chairs of the CAPS themselves.
Why didn't they come then? So what happened? This was a request I asked for before. Why? Yeah.
So, Chair, with your permission, we have the 11.2.2. The Assembly of Governors should commend the Making Finance Work for Africa Macroeconomic and Financial Management Institute for Eastern and Southern Africa, MIFMI, and Financial Sector Reform and Strengthening Initiative, FIRST, for the assistance provided to CAPS, and also the Assembly of Governors is invited to approve the launch of the third CAPS working group on Basel regulations chaired by the Central Bank of Egypt, the terms of reference of the working group on Basel, and the dispatching of fintech and cybersecurity activities among the working groups chaired by the Central Bank of Nigeria and the South Africa Reserve Bank respectively, and also the chairs of the working groups should be reminded by the AECB Secretariat of their contributions to the development of the 2020-2022 CAPS work program.
Mr. Papadiop, could you explain in terms of the Assembly of Governors commend making finance work for Africa, macroeconomic? Could you explain? And then tell us about the launch of the third GAPS working group and the Basel regulations. Where is this a decision of the AECB, or how did this come through? And explain more about the terms of reference of the working group and Basel regulations, etc.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Honorable Chairperson. For the CAPS working groups, it was already planned in the first program of CAPS, going from 2014 to 2016, that CAPS should have 3 working groups. One of the working groups was the working group on crisis management and banking regulation and banking resolution. The second working group was on cross-border banking supervision. And the third working group was on Basel regulations. So those three working groups were already in the program of the first CAPS work program. The 2 working groups were already set and established. The first one, the working group on crisis management and banking resolution, led by the Central Bank of Nigeria, already started activities. And the second working group also on the cross-border banking supervision, led by the South African Reserve Bank, also started activities. And we had reports from those working groups that are taken into account in the CAPS report in general. We had 1/3 working group that should be established in that first work program, and that was the working group on Basel. And that working group was established during the last CAPS meeting held in June in Cairo. And the Central Bank of Egypt is chairing that working group.
But what are the objectives of these working groups when they were established, and what is the outcome and the output of these working groups? Okay. This is what the committee needs to know.
Okay.
So can you give us a briefing about what are the objectives of these working groups? Just working and deliberating and discussing? Or there are certain objectives, they are targeting certain things that is aligned to the strategic direction of what the AECB wants to achieve? And what is the progress?
Okay. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Each working group has prepared terms of reference to indicate how they should be implementing their work program. And each working group does meetings, organized meetings, to go over some topics. For example, if you take the working group on cross-border banking supervision, they have organized at least 5 meetings in cross-border banking, in AML-CFT.
Meetings are not an objective. The objective is not the meeting. Yeah. So, yeah, what to achieve?
Okay. Yeah, what should be achieved by the working groups is to have training in certain topics. For example, what I was saying, the meetings or seminars that the working group on cross-border banking supervision organized was to help participants understand better some topics in terms of banking supervision. And the objective was to allow those experts to know better what's going on in the area of cross-border banking.
Egypt was the chair of the CAPS, right, this last year?
Yeah.
Can Egypt tell us a little bit about that? What have they done with the caps?
I can just comment and elaborate about the tasks that we are responsible for, which is Basel. Actually, the purpose of the Basel Committee is to help our countries in converting the Basel standards into achievable and implementable guidelines and regulations. In terms of how to set consultative papers, how can you set the education papers, communication strategy for the terms of Basel, how can you set standard templates and the QIS in order to conduct proper QIS to measure exactly the impact on our banks if we implement Basel. Moreover, how we can overcome of the limit that of the limits that already in the Basel standard. Basel standard specifically in Pillar 2, we have many comments on the limitation that in this standard. How can we will help our country, how can we overcome these limits in Basel? How can we set corrective action plan at the aggregate and the market level if we see some banks do not meet the minimum requirement, and this to be aligned with capital planning if needed? How can we convert qualitative issues, which is very, very important, into quantitative measurements in order to ensure that banks are in the right track? This is actually the objective, and this objective has to be translated into type of deliverables. Thank you.
And this was through a number of meetings and workshops with the central banks have been being conducted.
To be conducted and with a certain deliverables, because deliverables is the most important.
Yeah. So the working group is responsible for monitoring the achievement of deliverables, or the Secretariat monitors this and see what kind of progress is achieved?
And I believe the objective of the committee is, as I mentioned right now, but the follow-up and the receiving the information and data should come through the Secretary.
Because like the Governor Niago was saying, the ownership, it's very important for each project, who's the ownership and who's monitoring this and making sure information is disseminated across. So do you have the team that can make sure to be able to monitor all what's going on and the follow-up, or the $200,000 are enough?
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. In fact, at the AACB secretarial level, because most of the work for the working groups is done at the working groups level, and reports are submitted to the AACB secretariat. But when a working group is implementing its program, we follow what the working group is doing. And for each year, the working group submits before the CAPS meeting a report. And during the CAPS meeting, all the work activities of the working groups are discussed among supervisors. And at that time, I would say that all the CAPS working group leaders are at the CAPS meeting. So they are there, they explain what they have been doing, they explain what they have been achieved, they explain what is to be undertaken in the future. So during the CAPS meeting, we do all that.
A working group like Nigeria, like Egypt, or it's rotating. I just wanted to be educated with regards to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For the working groups, we did not have a set period. What was said is that during the CAPS meeting, we will have discussions with the working groups chairs as to, in terms of the implementation of their work programs, if they should continue to share the working groups, or if there should be a shift to another central bank. But the establishment of the working groups were not set to have a limit. But during the CAPS meetings, there is always discussions on how the working groups are being chaired and how the working groups are working. And a discussion could have also in terms of the term that should be the one that the working groups should have.
So
I mean, in
the
terms of
three
chair.
chairs now have been there for, the Basel is new.
Yeah.
The other two chairs have been there for how long, and have they changed, or are they the same? And
Yeah, the other chairs have been there till 2014.
from
From
2014?
yeah,
From
and
2014.
yeah, 2014, and they did not change. Yeah.
You have a recommendation?
It's a fact, but we don't know, is this what we want, or it's because those central banks for the time being are
No, but because
able to
I think
provide the
because
leadership?
what
I just wanted really to know what is
believe
going.
what
Since
happens
we will be
really,
chairing, so I wanted to have more
what really
clarity.
happens, I think it depends on the availability and time that these members have, because they have their jobs. So they probably will have one of them, and then maybe he'll apologize after 2 years because he's got more assignments or whatever. But I think it is being done between the CABS working group themselves. But if you want to formalize it, we can formalize it.
Yeah, I could just add that certainly we don't have a term, but like I said, during the CAPS meeting, the working groups activities are discussed. And if, for example, we have a working group, another central bank that is interested in leading a working group, the issue can be discussed. And certainly CAPS can come with a decision to say, okay, for 5 years, this central bank has been leading this working group. Now we have another central bank that is interested in leading the working group, and CAPS can make the decision, and we'll have to report to the governors that this working group is now led by this central bank. What I wanted to say is that we did not have at the beginning set deadlines for each working group. But since each year CAPS should be meeting, they will discuss about the program, the activities of each working group, and if the issue comes, because we have other central banks interested in sharing a working group, then that could be discussed, and CAPS will take a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're done with this one. So the CABS chairmanship will be handed over to the National Bank of Rwanda from August 2019. That's the total CABS, but the working groups, well, the chairmanship should be able to decide in terms of the heads of the working groups too, right?
Yeah, that's also a possibility, but all these will be discussed during the CAPS meetings. If, for example, the chairman of CAPS consider that we have another central bank that should lead, then it will be discussed, and CAPS will make recommendation or decisions. Thank you.
Do we have anything else to add here? Huh? Governor? Governor? Yes, please, Nigeria.
Thank you, Chair. I think probably the Central Bank of Rwanda may have raised an important issue. And I don't see how asking the working groups to go and determine the chairmanship within them would work. Because when the CAPS was created, this assembly created the framework for CAPS to operate. So if the issue of leadership of the working group becomes an issue and comes up to mention at all, it means concerns are being expressed. And it's only fair for this assembly to set a direction and give very clear guidance. If we don't give guidance and ask the subgroup to go and provide guidance for themselves, then perhaps the concerns could grow. So I would think that since it's come up, then the Assembly should give guidance and say, okay, look, perhaps the working group, because saying that if a central bank thinks it can lead, I don't think there's any central bank around the table here that would be challenged to provide leadership on the continent that would be unable to provide that leadership. So if the Assembly thinks there's merit in this issue that has come, it should give very clear directive or very clear guidance so that perhaps then the CABs will work around the guidance that the Assembly has given. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, I think we just maintain the status quo. We have 3 banks that have been chairing the working groups. I think there's no complaint from anybody. So let's just maintain it as it is. If maybe except if it comes from the central bank that is chairing a working group and wants to hand over the chair. But for now, I prefer we leave it as it is and we maintain the status quo and we're happy with what is happening, the work they are doing. Thank you.
Because usually, Governor, what happens is that they are colleagues from the same discipline, from supervision and regulation. So when they're sitting together, they feel they want Mr. X to take care. So they like elect him between themselves, you know, feeling that this would be the right person. And we don't know them, right? But I think also in terms of the technical working groups, you need years of experience. You need people who've been there for time. You need to build years of knowledge of the progress of the work. It's not like a place where you need to make reshuffles quickly. But I agree with the Governor. And since we're just starting since 2014, so for the time being, let's keep it at that. And then decide by the output of the work. Okay, let's have a break.
Yeah, I just had
yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, just for an announcement. So coffee break will be at foyer A, and there will be a group photo for all the governors, heads of delegation, as they head out for the break. Certainly the protocol of the National Bank of Rwanda will help. So the lunch will be room foyer A. Thank you. But before that, there will be the group photo. Thank you.
Thank you.